You got another jam, boy. This was one heck of a collaboration, a remake, a stellar remake. At number 4, up 6 from number 10, we got the Fat Boys. Remember the Fat Boys, along with the generous vocals of the Beach Boys, gracing the record. A remake of Wipeout on this fancy playlist of, oh boy, August 29th, 1987. Welcome aboard once again with Dean Kirk, and I'm gonna have to do this video in 2 parts because I got some information from one source, and then I came across an article, an old Los Angeles Times article, sort of about the Fat Boys, where they interviewed the Fat Boys a little bit. So a little bit of both. Do a little bit of both. All right, let's go ahead and get started. But first off, a personal memory of the Fat Boys. They were stationed down in Pickens County. In Carrollton, I believe it was in Aliceville or Carrollton. It's about a half hour or 40 minutes away from here. About 40, maybe about 35, 40 miles from here. They had a radio station called WRAG, an AM station. Boy, they were throwing down some Fat Boys. I remember listening to the Fat Boys on the car radio from WRAG, WRAG, out of Carrollton, Aliceville, and this was back in 1984, 1983. And I tell you, one of the guys that beatbox, he had this. One of the interesting sounds earlier on was there was one fellow who could do rhythms with grunting and using his body to sort of emulate a drum machine of sorts, and it was added an interesting feel to the sound of the Fat Boys. One of the early rap groups got Curtis Blow, Houdini, and Run DMC, and Fat Boys. They had they came out with about 4 albums that either went gold or platinum. From about 1983, 1984, all the way to about 1988. But the thing about the Fat Boys was some of their earlier efforts, like Jailhouse Rap, did not cross over on CHR radio. They were strictly, basically, a rap R&B presence, although there was certainly more to the Fat Boys than that. They were certainly very talented, not only at rapping, they were fantastic rappers, but they also they did movies, and they signed a 3-picture deal with Warner Brothers. I'll get into more of that maybe in the second part later on. And they were entertaining, they were fun, and boy, they ate a lot. Boy, they chowed down big time. And holding these eating expeditions at restaurants, chunking down the fast food. Now, collectively speaking, one source has it that they weighed 1,000 pounds collectively. But I read somewhere else that they were actually 750 pounds. Well, one way or the other, these 3 guys, they were pretty big. From Brooklyn, they grew up in the same street, the same area in Brooklyn. They started rapping together in 1980. They rapped on street corners. They rapped in the basement. And in 1983, they participated in a Radio City, it was called the Radio City Talent Contest. It was a talent contest that was held at Radio City Music Hall that was sponsored by one of the sponsors. Well, Coca-Cola was a sponsor of this talent contest. It was a dance and rap contest sponsored by Coca-Cola, sponsored by a local, well, it was a big R&B urban station in New York City called WBLS, sponsored by them, and sponsored by a Swiss person. His name was Charles Statler. Well, here's I believe I pronounced his name right. I hope I did anyway. Well, here's the deal. The Fat Boys, they made a big splash at this competition. They won. They won the talent contest at Radio City Music Hall in New York City. They teamed up. Well, actually, they met their manager, Charles Statler, the guy who helped sponsor this event. He became their manager. He helped groom the Fat Boys. And after watching the way the Fat Boys are binging on food and everything, and watching their waistline just kind of growing, he decided, well, they need to change their name. See, I forgot to mention this. They originally called the Disco 3. But Charles Statler suggested, well, since you guys are kind of big and you eat a lot, let's call yourself the Fat Boys. The Fat Boys, they teamed up initially with a producer named James Mason. He was a jazz guitarist. He produced their first single called Reality. And that's kind of an interesting collaboration, a jazz musician with a rap group. But it's probably interesting to note, though, that the Fat Boys didn't want to be just regarded as a I mean, they didn't just want to be regarded as a rap act, but an entertainment and a comedy act, all wrapped up together. A multifaceted, a multi-talented act. Well, reality came out, and then guess what happened? Yeah, they teamed up with Curtis Blow, one of the early rappers. Remember Basketball back in 1985? Well, Curtis Blow, he teamed up with the Fat Boys, and he produced a couple of records by them. One of them was called the Fat Boys, and then they paired it with Human Beatbox, and now they got on the R&B charts on Billboard, and that's when they renamed themselves the Fat Boys. And oh yeah, 1984. Now I've read a little bit about how this tour came about. I won't go into all the details of this, but the bottom line is the Fat Boys participated in the Fresh Festival in 1984. It was an all-star act, the who's who of the rap acts on this festival, including Curtis Blow, Run DMC, Houdini, the French Come Out at Night. Yeah, boy, they're throwing down. And Nucleus, remember Nucleus from 1984, summer 1984, Nucleus jam on it. That was a jamming mama jamma right there. And they came out, Jailhouse Rap came out, went to number 17 on the R&B charts. And then they did a full-length Fat Boys album, which would include Jailhouse Rap, Human Beatbox, and it was called the Fat Boys, produced by Curtis Blow. Then they appeared in a movie called Crush Groove, and they made a big splash in Crush Groove. They were pretty impressive, and that's when they secured a three-movie deal with Warner Brothers. And I wrote down somewhere how much that thing was worth. It was just a 3-movie deal with Warner Brothers, probably worth a lot of money. And they came out with another album where their second album was called Fat Boys Are Back. And they had about 3 R&B singles off of that. I think they only had about maybe one top 10 R&B single, maybe a couple of top 10 singles on the R&B, the Fat Boys. And in 1986, they released the third album called Big and Beautiful. And that went to number 10 on the R&B album charts, that particular album did. And then it was Crush It in 1987, the song they did with the Beach Boys. Now, they did a movie called Disorderlies. And Disorderlies, well, it says it all right here. It was sort of a screwball comedy where they were taking care of this rich guy. I just read about it, never seen the movie, but I just read a little bit about it. They were taking care of this rich guy, but they were kind of messing up. But despite that, though, it was a good-natured sort of movie. And these 3 guys played the nurses or orderlies. They played orderlies. So there you go. The title Disorderlies in the movie. A little bit more of that when I get to the second part. But now, a couple of these guys, they died. They passed away. The Human Beatbox. I forgot to give you their names. I've been jumping ahead of myself so much. All this excitement here. 3 guys in this, but there was Prince Marky D. Morales. He passed away. He passed away about a year ago in 2021. And there was Human the Beatbox Robinson, he passed away in 1995. He died of a heart attack, and he was 28 years old. And I guess that would make Damon Cool Rock Ski Wembley, the surviving member of the original Fat Boys. Morales, Prince Marky D, he died just a day before. He passed away just a day before his 53rd birthday. He had a heart problem. He had chest pains, and the doctors, they were going to put a stent. But before they were able to put a stent in him, he passed away. So there you go right there. And by the way, that talent contest at the Radio City Music Hall was held in 1983. So now let's go ahead and go to part 2. Without further ado, let's do it. Let's do it right now. Welcome to part two. I'm going to give the chart stats of Wipeout in just a few minutes. But on part two, I came across an interesting article. It's an old article online by the Los Angeles Times where a reporter was interviewing the Fat Boys. Now, the Fat Boys, this was in the fall of '87, and they were interviewed. It was in a dining room at a West Hollywood hotel. And the people there, they recognized the Fat Boys, and they were there eating breakfast, but a lot of people there who recognized them, they thought, oh boy, this is going to be entertaining, because they thought they're going to have, they thought the waiters and everything were going to bring in a truckload or boatload of food to feed these guys, but all they had, notwithstanding their reputation, was bacon and eggs, and that's it. And they said that they already had breakfast, but they seemed to be out of it because Robinson, he fell asleep right there. Fell asleep on the table, and although he did wake up and participate in the interview, and they were going to do some shows that particular day. They're going to do a show at the Greek Theater, and then they had another show coming that Saturday at the Pacific Amphitheater and the Cafe Costa Mesa, I believe. I can't read my chicken scratch. I just slap it down. But all this in California, and. But Morales, now this is when Disorderlies came out. This interview happened about 6 weeks after Disorderlies, the movie, came out. And Morales was disappointed. He thought this movie would be a smash. It could have been a smash, but he was upset. And he was a little bit combative towards the reporter, because the thing about it was, he thought that Disorderly was not marketed correctly. It was marketed as a rap movie, but he wanted more as more of an entertainment, a comedy movie, because this movie showcased their comedy. It showcased their comedic or their comedy chops, and it just. He thought it would be a bigger movie, and he was obviously, from what I gathered on this interview, he was not very happy about it, because they had that real successful movie with Crush Groove in 1985, and then they got that three-picture deal with Warner Brothers. It is worth noting, though, that 6 weeks after the release, Disorderlies made $10 million. Ultimately, it would make over $10 million in gross. I guess that's not superstar standing, but that seems to be pretty substantial, $10 million. Of course, we're talking 1987. And this was off a budget. The budget to make this movie was $5 million. So they made, I guess, $5 million of profit off of this movie right here. But obviously, Morales was not too happy about how things were turning out, at least not in this interview. Okay, let's go into Wipeout. The chart stats of Wipeout. These guys could rap. Wipeout went to number 12 on Billboard's Hot 100, but it did even better in England. Went to number 2 in England, went to number 2 in New Zealand, and it's worth noting, too, that Jailhouse Rap charted in England. 1983, 1984, went to number 63, though, in the UK. The thing about the Fat Boys was the pop programmers, the CHR radio stations, they just completely ignored them. And they were just too R&B, and they were just, and it really wasn't until they teamed up with the Beach Boys and they did that, they had their big crossover with Wipeout, and they would even have a bigger crossover. One of the best remakes, a highly energized, and I use energized, which is saying a lot. They redid the Twist with Chubby Checker. They teamed up with Chubby Checker, and they did the Twist in the summer of 1988, a song that went to number 1 or number 2 in the UK, and it did pretty good here in the States as well. One of the finest remakes ever. I miss those fun rap records. I do. I'll be honest with you. I do. They really, they banged it up, baby. They banged it up, the Fat Boys. They sure did. Well, anyway, let's get back to my fancy playlist of August 29th, 1987. Got the Fat Boys, baby, at number 4 on this fancy playlist, jumping 6 notches from number 10. Once again, fancy playlist of August the 29th, 1987. Take care. Wait a minute, just one more thing real quick. I reviewed the previous two videos regarding the Fat Boys. I want to correct something. I made a little boo-boo on the first part. I mentioned the album Crushin'. It was the album Crushin', but I said the Crushin' was a collaboration they did with the Beach Boys. I actually meant Wipeout. The album that Wipeout was off of was called Crushin'. It was the Fat Boys, their fourth, I believe it was their fourth album that came out in 1987. Enough said.